What's happening, guys? Steve here, Cars with Steve, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2020 Ford Escape. Now, this video, again, is going to be one of the short videos, so going through some of the basics of the vehicle, talking about body styling, engine choices, things like that. If you want to know every little detail about the vehicle, all the features, how they work, etc., look up above if you're on desktop, down below in the description if you're on mobile to get a direct link to a full in-depth vehicle review, which goes over everything. But this one is going to be a short review. And guys, before we get started, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the video, like the content I'm putting out, please make sure that you like the video and consider subscribing to the channel, because I do all sorts of giveaways, giving away Amazon gift cards. There are some big giveaways coming up when I get to that 1,000 subscriber mark. So stay tuned for that because it is exciting. Guys, let's dig right into it, figure out what the 2020 Ford Escape has to offer. Alright, so starting off on the 2020 vehicle, we are looking at the SEL version of this thing. So there are different trim levels available. You've got the Escape S versus the SE, the SEL, and the Titanium. There are plug-in hybrids available, there are regular hybrids available. There are a ton of options available in this vehicle. Taking a look at the actual body styling of this thing though. So it is new for the 2020 year, so that's when it did get its facelift. I personally love the new bubble style look in this thing. We jump around to the back, so it has departed quite a little bit. Like if you look at the older school body stylings, the 2000, early 2000 era, where it's very boxy of an Escape, they've made significant differences. Now, if you are a lover of that boxier style Escape, guys, guess what? The Bronco's coming out within the next 6 months, and realistically, the Bronco is going to be your best bet to get an Escape style feel with the old school Escape box styling. But when it comes down to the Escape SE, SEL, etc., when we look across the trim levels, you've got a couple engine choices available. When it comes to the gas engines, we've either got a 1.5 liter EcoBoost, so a 1.5 liter turbo, or a 2 liter turbo instead. So when it comes down to horsepower, the numbers are going to pop up on screen. The 1.5 liter has got 181 horsepower, 190 foot-pounds of torque. In comparison, the 2 liter engine is going to have 250 horsepower and 280 foot-pounds of torque. But let's take a look and see some of the things that are going to come basic when it comes to the 2020 Escapes across every trim level. As a basic now, you've got the blind spot monitoring system. Lets you know if anybody's entered the blind spot on either side of the vehicle. You've got a lane keeping system included as well. And standard across the trim level, we also have the backup camera. Now, when it comes down to it, the S model of the vehicle is not going to have the reverse sensing system. The SE doesn't have it standard. The SEL does. So the backup sensing system is available in the SEL, or, well, technically the SE trim level as well, but it's available as an add-on option. So whether or not you get that, again, matter of personal preference. When it comes down to the actual trunk of this thing, popping this open, it is power up, which is kind of nice, so button press and then up from there. We can either press the button to drop it, or we can use the key fob in order to do it. So taking a quick peek, I should say, at the key fob, we've got our unlock button, lock, remote start, our trunk release, as well as our horn button. Now this is the SE trim level, which is why we've got that power release. If we were in the S or the SE, it would be a manual release instead. When it comes down to sizing though, the sizing is going to be the same across the trim levels with the exception of the hybrid. When we get into the hybrid, we lose a couple inches along the top, and that's really just space for the battery there. But underneath, we've got the mini spare tire, a little bit of storage space along the side. In the very back, we've got our little spigot that we would use, and if we ever need to fill up the tank using a jerry can. In the back as well, we've got a 12-volt adapter. So very, very straightforward, very spacious. When it comes to the gas in these things, so when we look at the horsepower specs on it, so the 181 and the 190 and the 1.5 liter, well, whether you look at the 1.5 or the 2 liter, minimum recommended fuel on these things is the 87 octane, so regular gas. Now, having said that, if you put in a premium fuel like 89 or 91 instead, you will notice slightly better performance. Looking at it as a capless system, so insert the fuel hose from there and you're good to go. Click it to lock it back into place. Now, when it comes to the back seat of the Escape, so a couple things to point out of the back. So as I mentioned, 2020 is the year that it's got its upgrade, but it's got a very, very different look to it in comparison. If we look at the back seat, we've got a 60-40 split, so 60% on the driver's side, 40% on the passenger side, and the seats themselves are manual up and manual down. So in order to fold the seats down, very straightforward, we're just going to press at the very top this button, which is going to lower that, and pulling back, we've got a lever. Going to crank that lever, and down goes the seat. So very straightforward in order to be able to get that seat down. And that works the same for the driver and the passenger side. Click it back up to lock it back into place. Now, a couple other things to point out. We do have cup holders available. Now, when it comes to spacing in this thing, so one thing to note, I am 6 feet tall. The driver's seat is set up for somebody who's 6 feet tall, and looking in the back, I still have a ton of space. Up overhead, I've got about an inch of head space. Down below, I've still got plenty of space for my feet as well, and my knees still have a bunch of room. So if you've got people that are a little bit taller, go in knowing that you've got a ton of space options available in the Escape. One other nice thing that's unique to the Escape is that it's also got the ability to move the seat back and forward. So as you can see, we've got a little lever on the bottom there, which means that we can move back and forward there. So tons of spacing available, I should say. On the very bottom, we've got some USB ports, so our traditional USB and our USB-C for a quicker charge. Now, when it comes to the front seat of this thing, let's hop on in and take a quick peek. All right, so a couple things to point out right from the get-go. Taking a peek at the left-hand side. So in the SEL trim level and above, we've got the ability to have seat memory buttons. So that's really, really good if you've got a number of different people driving this vehicle, because we can remember up to 3 individual seat settings. We've got the ability to adjust our mirrors, and we've got our power up and down for the windows. Along the side, we can open or close the trunk. We can adjust whether or not our lights are off, whether they're on, whether they're on auto, which, guys, realistically, always make sure you've got it on the auto setting. It's automatically going to determine whether or not the daytime or the nighttime running lamps are going. We've got our dimmer switches there as well. Now, a couple other things to point out in the Escape S, SE, and SEL. It is going to be telescopic steering wheel. Lock it back into place, so very straightforward. Along the side, we do have our Sync 3 system. Now, the Sync 3 system gives you the ability to use Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. One thing to note is that you do need to make sure that you've got the SE or above in order to get this larger Sync 3 screen. When it comes down to the S version of the vehicle, it's going to be our regular Sync system. The Sync system, it's dated. I'm going to show you just on screen here. That's going to pop up showing you what that looks like, as I don't recommend that screen. The technology is dated, and with 2021 coming along, Sync 4 is going into the vehicles going forward as well. A couple things to point out in the screen. This one does have the added 360 Plus package, which gives you adaptive cruise control, and it also gives you voice-activated navigation built in. So the screen itself, as I mentioned, does support Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so if you don't get one with the navigation, you can still use the Waze app, Google Maps, Android Maps, whatever the case may be, directly through the center console screen. Very straightforward. We've got some audio settings, we've got our phone settings, so we've got the ability to connect a phone, we've got the ability to use some apps on the screen as well. So you can use the Waze app directly through the middle. If you use things like Spotify, LiveX Live, etc., that's all going to be able to be used in the middle screen. As we move down, we've got our volume rockers, the ability to tune, we can change stations, we can change songs, play or pause, we can pull up our audio settings. And then we've got the ability to turn the screen off, so it's more of a calming screen. Press to turn that back on. As we move down the cluster, so as you can see, we've got our 4-way blinkers. We've got the ability to control whether or not the fans are going. Moving down, in the Escape S, SE, and the SEL, we've got a single zone climate control. The Titanium's got dual zone instead. One other thing to point out, this thing does have heated seats, and it's got the package for the heated steering wheel as well, which is great. Moving down a bit, we've got our USB port, as well as a traditional cigarette lighter adapter. Moving down a little bit more, so something that's new to the 2020 Escape is we've gotten rid of the regular gear shift, and we're now looking at something that's a rotary dial instead. So what we would do is we would just make sure we hit the brake, and we can rotate between our different drive modes there. One thing to note is that the L is a low setting instead. Moving down a little bit more, we've got some cup holders, we've got our parking brake, auto hold. The auto hold setting, when that one's turned on, if you're stopped at a light and you take your foot off the brake, it's going to hold the vehicle in place. our auto engine start stop. So that's the one that's going to kill power to the engine sometimes. Doesn't happen all the time. It's really up to the vehicle when that setting turns on or off. If you have the AC going, if you've got the audio going, if you've got things plugged in, it may not turn off at all. So it really is up to the vehicle when it decides to turn off. If you're not a fan, on a case-by-case basis, so every time you turn the vehicle on, off, and then back on again, you have to make sure you press that button. This is going to be our different drive modes. So as we take a peek on the screen, I'm going to press that button there. So we've got some different drive modes. We've got our normal, EcoSport, slippery, deep snow and sand, and then back to our normal drive mode again. So the vehicle does have the ability for either front wheel or all-wheel drive. If you get all-wheel drive, it's an intelligent all-wheel drive. What that means is most of the time it's probably going to keep you in front-wheel drive, but the car's electronic brain, if it recognizes slippage in any of the wheels, it's automatically going to distribute power to those wheels as necessary. It does help with winter driving, a little bit more traction and control in the wintertime, but again, we're in Canada. If you're in the US northern states where you get heavy snow, it's always a good idea to have winter tires regardless of whether you have a front wheel or an all-wheel drive vehicle. When it comes down to the steering wheel, couple things to point out. So a few things here. We've got our adaptive cruise control. So the adaptive cruise control is really neat. It's essentially a set it and forget it cruise control. So if a vehicle in front of you starts to slow down, yours will automatically brake, and then it can pick you back up to speed again if they get out of the way. Now, when it comes down to it, we've got a distance indicator there. So as you can see, we've got a couple bars showing up, and that indicates how far or how close you are away from the vehicle that's in front of you. As we move down, we've got the ability then to set our cruise control speed. So let's say if you're at 110 kilometers an hour on the highway, you'd set it. Car in front of you slows down, yours will automatically brake using this system. Now, this isn't available as a default. So it's the the Copilot 360 package plus, I should say, which includes the adaptive cruise control and the voice activated navigation. So really your call if you want that. You have to get both of them. It's essentially not either a one or the other scenario. On our steering wheel, we've got the ability to adjust the volume. We can mute. Along our side, we can pull up some menu options. We've got the ability to answer a phone call, hang up, switch between songs, and we can also use this in order to change radio stations, navigate if we've got factory navigation, or we can make a phone call using this button. Up along our right stick, we've got the ability to select how much windshield wiper fluid comes out. We can turn on our rear window wipers. Along our left-hand side, we've got our ability to turn the high beams on or off. On the very end of it, this little button is going to be our lane keeping system. So the lane keeping system works technically three ways. The first way is a little bit of a steering wheel shake. In that steering wheel shake, if you start to veer over into a lane without signaling, it'll shake the steering wheel, almost as if you're running over rumble pavement. When it comes down to the lane centering system, so that centering system, if you start to veer over into a lane slowly, what it'll do is this thing will highlight red, and then it'll start to pull you back into your lane. So it kind of recenters you back into your lane. It's not a true, hands-free driving system as of yet. That is coming though, which is very, very exciting. The third option that's available is going to be a combination of both. So if you start to veer over into a lane without signaling, a little bit of a steering wheel shake, and it's also gonna pull you back in and recenter you into your lane. So it's a really, really great feature. I love the fact that Ford has now included this as a safety feature in the vehicles. A couple other things to point out. Down alongside, we do have a USB port inside of our little box here. A little bit of storage space. And we've also got our typical glove compartment there as well. When it comes up overhead, we've got the ability to turn our cabin lights on, off, or completely off, if you choose the option with the sunroof. So if you don't need a sunroof, you've got that option, but it is a twin panel sunroof, so lifting that up, as you can see, it just opens it up, and it's just so beautiful. So beautiful. Opening that roof up. Right, look at that. But if you're the type of person where you typically don't drive with the sunroof open anyways, you can save yourself about $1,700 by choosing to not go with the sunroof. Back up overhead, we've got our sunglasses holder as well. Oh, there we go. Perfect. We've got our sunglasses holder. Lock that back into place. Both sides, we've also got... Hello. Perfect. And that's going to be the basics of the Escape on the inside. Now, one of the things that's really, really neat, so this message is now coming up inside of the vehicle. So where that really comes into play is if you've potentially got a kid in the back seat. I love the fact that Ford's now got that as an option. It's a great safety feature. I love the fact that they've done it in the Escape, and I do hope that they carry it across future vehicles as well. When it comes back to the outside of this thing, like, it looks beautiful. It's got a nice look to it, but again, it's a matter of personal preference. We've got our fog lamps, we've got our regular daytime and nighttime running lamps, a beautiful honeycomb grille in the front there as well. So whether or not you go with the Escape, again, matter of personal preference, but there are a lot of beautiful things about this new vehicle. Well, that's really the Escape in a nutshell. I hope you guys learned a thing or two. And as I mentioned, if you want the more detailed, in-depth look at these things, look down in the description. I've got a link for all of the vehicle trim levels, with the exception of one, which is coming soon. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, make sure you drop them down below. If you've got an idea for a video that you'd like to see in the future, leave it down in the comments, because you never know. I most likely will end up shooting it, and I'll give you guys a shout out as well. Please consider subscribing to the channel and make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. But until I see you guys next time, stay safe.